The morning sunlight streamed through the blinds of the State Bar Association office as Director James Wilson paced back and forth. Across from him sat Maya and Maya Johnson, identical twin sisters with matching determined expressions. Both women had graduated at the top of their class from Harvard Law School 3 years ago and had quickly built reputations as brilliant attorneys who could win seemingly impossible cases. "I wouldn't ask this of you if we had any other options," Director Wilson said, sliding a folder across his polished desk. "Judge Walter Simmons has had 17 complaints filed against him in the past year alone, all from people of color who claim he treated them unfairly in his courtroom." Maya picked up the folder and flipped through the pages, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the documents. "But none of these complaints went anywhere," she noted. "Exactly," Wilson replied with frustration. "We can't prove a pattern of bias without hard evidence. Judge Simmons is careful. He makes his comments seem like normal judicial behavior to outside observers." Maya leaned forward, her fingers tapping thoughtfully on the armrest. "And you want us to go undercover to catch him in the act?" Wilson nodded. "You're both exceptional attorneys, but you're also new enough to the district that Simmons won't recognize you. We need people who understand the law inside and out, who can appear in his courtroom as ordinary citizens but who will recognize when he crosses legal and ethical lines." The twins exchanged a glance, communicating silently as they had done since childhood. This wasn't just another case. This was about justice in its most fundamental form. "It won't be easy," Maya said, thinking aloud. "We'll need solid cover stories, different cases that would naturally come before his court." Director Wilson nodded. "We've thought about that. Maya, you could pose as a tenant fighting an eviction. Mia, you would be a defendant in a small civil dispute. Both cases where people often represent themselves." Maya tapped the desk with her pen. "The risk is significant. If Judge Simmons discovers we're attorneys conducting an investigation, he could file complaints against us for misrepresentation. That's why this has to be an official undercover operation," Wilson explained. "Everything properly authorized. The Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court has secretly approved this investigation. Your law licenses will be protected." The sisters sat quietly for a moment, weighing the decision. Around them, the office hummed with the normal sounds of a busy legal department. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, distant conversations. Maya finally broke the silence. "If Judge Simmons is really showing bias against people based on their race, he's harming the entire justice system. Every unfair ruling affects someone's life. And if we don't step up, who will?" Maya added. "The people filing these complaints don't have the resources or knowledge to fight back effectively." They both straightened in their chairs, decision made. "We'll do it," they said in unison. Director Wilson's shoulders relaxed visibly. "Thank you. We'll start preparing your cases immediately. For the next few weeks, you'll need to learn your cover identities completely. You'll have to dress differently, speak differently." Maya smiled slightly. "Don't worry about that part. We've been switching places since we were kids. We know how to become someone else." As they left the office, the sisters walked with purpose. What lay ahead would test everything they had learned in law school and beyond. But for the first time, they weren't just arguing the law, they were protecting it. The assignment had begun. The Johnson twins sat in their shared apartment surrounded by stacks of papers, legal documents, and carefully selected clothing items spread across the living room floor. 2 weeks had passed since they accepted the undercover assignment, and every minute had been dedicated to building their new identities. "How does this look?" Maya asked, stepping out from the bathroom wearing worn jeans, a simple t-shirt, and no makeup. She had pulled her usually styled hair into a plain ponytail and replaced her designer glasses with an older, less fashionable pair. Maya looked up from her notes and studied her sister. "Much better. No judge would guess you argue cases worth millions of dollars looking like that." On the coffee table between them lay their carefully crafted backstories. Maya would become Maya Williams, a single mother of 2 working as a cashier at a local grocery store, facing eviction after her landlord claimed she violated her lease by running a small home business selling handmade crafts online. "I memorized everything about the tenant protection laws," Maya said, flipping through her note cards. "But I need to be careful not to sound too knowledgeable." Maya nodded. "That's the tricky part. We need to know enough to recognize when Judge Simmons ignores proper legal procedure, and not seem like we have law degrees. For her part, Maya would become Maya Thompson, a home health aide being sued by a former client's family for allegedly damaging an expensive antique while cleaning. Her case would come before Judge Simmons 2 weeks after Maya's first appearance. A knock at the door interrupted their planning. Director Wilson entered, followed by a woman carrying a large equipment case. "This is Technician Rodriguez from our investigation unit," Wilson explained. "She's here to set you up with recording devices." Rodriguez opened her case, revealing what looked like ordinary objects: a watch, earrings, and a pen. "These are all approved for legal evidence collection in judicial misconduct cases," she explained, picking up the watch. "This has 8 hours of recording time and excellent audio quality." She demonstrated how each device worked, emphasizing that everything had been properly authorized. "Remember, this isn't about trapping the judge. It's about documenting patterns of behavior that might not be obvious in official court transcripts." The twins practiced using the devices, making sure they could activate them discreetly. "We've also assigned a court observer who will be present during your hearings," Director Wilson added. "She'll take notes on anything the recordings might miss: facial expressions, body language, how Judge Simmons treats other people in the courtroom compared to you." As evening approached, Maya and Maya visited the courthouse to familiarize themselves with the layout. They walked through security, noting where the metal detectors were positioned and making sure their recording devices wouldn't trigger any alarms. "Courtroom 4B, Maya murmured, peering through the glass window at the empty room where Judge Simmons presided. The American flag stood beside the judge's bench, the wooden gallery seats stretching back in neat rows. "It looks so different when you're not there as an attorney," Maya observed. "More intimidating somehow." They practiced their walks, their expressions, even how they would hold themselves when nervous or confused. Common emotions for people representing themselves in court. That night, as they reviewed their notes one final time, Maya looked at her sister with determined eyes. "We need to be perfect. One slip, one phrase that sounds too much like a lawyer, and the whole investigation could fall apart." Maya reached across the table and squeezed her sister's hand. "We won't slip. Too many people are counting on us to expose the truth." Their first court date was just 3 days away. The preparation was complete. Now it was time to face Judge Simmons and his courtroom. The courthouse bustled with morning activity as Maya entered through the heavy front doors. She wore her carefully selected outfit, a slightly wrinkled blouse tucked into simple black pants, and carried a worn folder containing her eviction papers. Her heart beat quickly, though not from nerves about facing a judge. This wasn't her first time in a courtroom, but it was her first time pretending to be someone she wasn't. "Eviction cases are in courtroom 4B, the security guard said after checking her papers. "Down the hall to your right." Maya thanked him quietly, careful to avoid the confident tone she normally used when entering courthouses. Today, she was Maya Williams, a struggling single mother fighting to keep her apartment, not attorney Maya Johnson who had argued cases before the state Supreme Court. Courtroom 4B was already half full when she arrived. She recognized the court observer from the Bar Association sitting in the back row, pretending to be a law student taking notes. She took a seat in the front row, fumbling slightly with her papers to appear nervous. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Walter Simmons," the bailiff announced. Judge Simmons entered, a tall man with silver hair and cold eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He moved with the confident stride of someone who had complete control over his domain. Maya had researched him thoroughly, studying old newspaper articles and court reports. 63 years old, 27 years on the bench, known for running an efficient courtroom and having one of the highest conviction rates in the district. After the first few cases were called, the bailiff finally announced, "Williams versus Parkview Properties." Maya approached the defendant's table, while a well-dressed attorney representing her landlord took his place at the plaintiff's table. She had deliberately arrived without many documents, carrying only what someone without legal training might think to bring. "Ms. Williams," Judge Simmons began without looking up from his papers, "you understand you're being evicted for violating the terms of your lease by running a business from your residence." "Yes, Your Honor," Maya replied, making her voice slightly uncertain. "But I don't believe I violated the lease. I just sell handmade crafts online to make extra money for my children." The judge looked at her properly for the first time, his eyes quickly scanning her appearance. Something in his expression changed subtly. The lease clearly states no commercial activities, he said dismissively. Your landlord has the right to evict you. Maya took a deep breath. Your Honor, if I may, the City Housing Code specifically states that small home-based businesses with no employees or customer traffic are exempt from commercial restrictions in residential leases. Judge Simmons raised his eyebrows. Have you been watching lawyer shows on television, Ms. Williams? The law isn't quite as simple as they make it seem. A few people in the courtroom chuckled. Maya felt the recording device in her watch press against her wrist, capturing every word. I researched my rights at the public library, she continued. Section 8.14 of the City Code. Ms. Williams, Judge Simmons interrupted, his tone growing sharper. I don't need a recitation of codes you barely understand. This is a straightforward case. The landlord's attorney smiled slightly, clearly pleased with the judge's response. Your Honor, Maya persisted. I also have evidence that my landlord knew about my small business for over a year and accepted rent without objection, which constitutes implied consent under. Enough? Judge Simmons cut her off, tapping his gavel lightly. Your interpretations of legal concepts are misguided. This isn't a debate club. He turned to the landlord's attorney. Mr. Foster, does your client wish to proceed with immediate eviction? Maya noticed how differently the judge spoke to the attorney, with respect and collegiality, compared to his dismissive tone with her. We're willing to allow 30 days to vacate, Your Honor, the attorney replied. Judge Simmons nodded. 30 days it is. Next case. Maya gathered her papers, appearing defeated but inwardly satisfied. The judge's bias had been subtle but unmistakable, and she had it all recorded. As she left the courtroom, she caught the court observer's eye. Phase 1 was complete. He completely dismissed me, Maya said, pacing the small conference room at the State Bar Association office. She had changed back into her normal professional attire, her attorney persona restored. Every time I cited a valid legal point, he acted like I was making it up. Maya nodded, reviewing the transcript of the hearing while Director Wilson listened to the audio recording. The three of them had gathered immediately after court to analyze what had happened. Listen to this part again, Wilson said, replaying a section where Judge Simmons had laughed off Maya's mention of housing statutes. Notice how his tone changes when he addresses the landlord's attorney versus when he speaks to you. And it wasn't just what he said, Maya added, sitting down finally. It was how he looked at me, like I wasn't worth his time from the moment he saw me. The door opened, and analyst Patrice Jenkins entered with a thick folder. I've compiled data from the last 50 cases in Judge Simmons' court, she announced, laying out several charts on the table. The pattern is becoming clearer. The group leaned in to examine the documents. The first chart showed case outcomes by defendant race. The second showed average speaking time allowed before interruption. The third displayed frequency of dismissive language used by the judge. In cases with similar facts and circumstances, Jenkins explained, pointing to key numbers, defendants of color are given less time to speak, interrupted more frequently, and have their motions denied at a rate 42% higher than white defendants. Maya shook her head in disgust, and he's careful about it. He never says anything explicitly racist. He masks it as impatience or maintaining courtroom efficiency. That's why this investigation is so important, Wilson said. Without your undercover work, these statistics alone might not be compelling enough for the Judicial Review Board. Maya studied the transcript again. My case comes up next week. Based on what we've seen, I think I need to take a different approach. She outlined her strategy, explaining how she would present her defense in a way that might expose even more of the judge's biases. While they planned, a court clerk named Thomas Rodriguez knocked on the door. He had been secretly helping with the investigation, providing insider information about how Judge Simmons behaved when no attorneys were present. I brought something you should see, Rodriguez said, handing them a file. These are notes from the judge's clerk about scheduling. Notice how cases with defendants whose names sound like they belong to people of color are consistently scheduled at the end of the day when the judge is tired and rushing. The system is designed to hide this kind of bias, Maya observed, reviewing the scheduling patterns. Each individual decision seems small, but together they create a pattern of injustice. Over the next few days, the twins worked tirelessly. They interviewed former defendants from Judge Simmons' courtroom who had filed complaints, gathering more personal stories to support their investigation. They practiced Maya's upcoming appearance, refining her character and preparing for various scenarios. Remember, Maya cautioned her sister as they rehearsed. Don't push too hard too fast. Let him reveal his bias naturally. Maya nodded. I'll start by being deferential, then gradually introduce more sophisticated legal arguments to see how he responds. The night before Mia's court appearance, they received an unexpected call from Director Wilson. Another complaint was just filed against Simmons, he said, his voice urgent. An elderly black woman lost her case today. The court reporter noted that Simmons made comments under his breath that weren't recorded in the official transcript. She was in tears afterward. The twins exchanged determined looks. Their investigation was no longer just about statistics and recordings. Real people were suffering because of Judge Simmons' biased behavior. Tomorrow, Maya said, her resolve strengthening, we take this to the next level. As she laid out her carefully selected outfit for court, a simple dress with no hint of her legal background, Maya knew this case had become personal. Justice needed to be blind, but Judge Simmons clearly wasn't, and they had the evidence to prove it. The morning air felt heavy with anticipation as Maya walked up the courthouse steps. Unlike her confident twin, she had decided to appear even more vulnerable for her day in court. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her clothes modest and slightly ill-fitting. The small recording device disguised as a decorative pin was securely fastened to her collar. Courtroom 4B was packed when she arrived. Maya spotted 3 familiar faces strategically positioned around the room: the court observer, another investigator posing as a journalism student, and Thomas Rodriguez, the helpful court clerk who had been assisting their investigation. Thompson versus Westfield, the bailiff called after several other cases had been heard. Maya rose shakily from her seat, clutching a folder of papers that appeared disorganized but was actually carefully arranged. Across the aisle, an expensively dressed attorney representing the Westfield family stood with perfect posture, a smug smile playing at his lips. Miss Thompson, Judge Simmons began, barely glancing at her. You're being sued for $5,000 for allegedly damaging an antique vase while working as a house cleaner for the Westfield family. How do you plead? Not guilty, Your Honor, Maya said, deliberately using incorrect legal terminology. I didn't do it. She noticed a small smile cross the judge's face at her mistake, exactly the reaction she had hoped for. This isn't criminal court, Miss Thompson, Judge Simmons said with exaggerated patience. You don't plead anything. This is a civil matter. I'm sorry, Your Honor, Maya replied, injecting nervousness into her voice. I'm not familiar with court procedures. The plaintiff's attorney presented his case first, describing how the careless cleaning lady had knocked over a valuable family heirloom while dusting. He presented photographs of the broken vase and an appraisal claiming its value. When it was Mia's turn, she rose hesitantly. Your Honor, I was very careful that day, like I am every day at work. The vase was already cracked before I started cleaning. I have pictures I took when I arrived. She fumbled with her phone, appearing disorganized but actually executing her plan perfectly. Judge Simmons sighed loudly. Miss Thompson, proper evidence needs to be submitted before trial, not presented from your phone during proceedings. I'm sorry, I didn't know, Maya said. Then carefully she added, but under Rule 43 of Civil Procedure, doesn't a defendant have the right to present evidence that wasn't available during discovery if it directly refutes the plaintiff's claim? The courtroom went silent. Judge Simmons stared at her, clearly surprised. Did you get that from the internet? He asked dismissively. Social media lawyers are the worst thing to happen to my courtroom in 20 years. A few spectators laughed. No, Your Honor, Maya continued. I went to the law library yesterday. The librarian helped me find information about my rights. The judge's expression hardened. Well, Miss Thompson, even if you did read about Rule 43, you've misinterpreted it completely. That rule applies to evidence that wasn't available during discovery, not evidence you simply failed to provide. Maya noticed how he addressed her compared to how he spoke to the plaintiff's attorney. Every time she made a valid point, he found a way to belittle her knowledge. Additionally, Maya pressed on, I have a statement from Mrs. Westfield's grandson who was visiting that day. He witnessed the vase was already broken and offered to tell the truth. Is this person present in court today? Judge Simmons asked. No, Your Honor. He's away at college, but he signed a statement. The judge shook his head. Then it's hearsay and inadmissible. Did your internet research miss that basic legal concept? His tone was dripping with condescension. The recording device captured every word, every inflection. Women like you, he muttered, just loudly enough for the front of the courtroom to hear, wasting the court's time instead of just taking responsibility. Mia's heart raced. That comment crossed a clear line of judicial impropriety. They had him now. I'll review the evidence presented and issue my ruling next week, Judge Simmons announced. But Miss Thompson, I suggest you start saving to pay this judgment. As Maya gathered her papers, she caught the eye of the court observer who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Phase 2 was complete, and more successful than they had hoped. The courtroom buzzed with unusual energy that morning. Reporters from the local newspaper sat in the back row, invited discreetly by Director Wilson. Judge Simmons' final hearing for Maya's eviction case was scheduled first, followed immediately by the ruling on Mia's damaged vase lawsuit. The twins had arrived separately, sitting on opposite sides of the courtroom. Both wore their simple disguises, but today they carried professional briefcases alongside their folders of amateur legal work. Inside those briefcases were their Bar Association credentials and the complete evidence from their investigation. All rise for the Honorable Judge Walter Simmons, the bailiff announced. The judge entered, looking confident as always. He nodded to the attorneys present, his eyes briefly passing over Maya without recognition. First case, Williams versus Parkview Properties, final eviction hearing, he announced. Maya approached the defendant's table, while the landlord's attorney took his place. The attorney looked relaxed, expecting an easy victory based on the judge's previous treatment of Maya. Ms. Williams, have you made arrangements to vacate the property as ordered? Judge Simmons asked without looking up. Actually, Your Honor, Maya replied, her voice suddenly stronger and more professional. I'd like to introduce new evidence before the final ruling. The judge sighed dramatically. Ms. Williams, we've been through this. Your home crafting business clearly violates the terms of your lease. Before we continue, Maya said, reaching into her briefcase, I need to clarify something important. She pulled out her Bar Association credentials and placed them on the table. A murmur ran through the courtroom. My name is not Maya Williams. I am attorney Maya Johnson, representing the State Bar Association's Judicial Conduct Committee. Judge Simmons' face froze in shock. At that moment, Maya stood up from her seat. And I am attorney Maya Johnson, also representing the Judicial Conduct Committee. The twins approached the bench together as the courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge's face had turned pale, his hands gripping the bench. What is the meaning of this? He demanded, his voice shaking slightly. Director Wilson stood from his seat in the gallery. Your Honor, the Bar Association has been conducting an authorized investigation into multiple complaints about judicial misconduct in your courtroom. This is outrageous. Judge Simmons sputtered. You've been deceiving this court. No deception, Your Honor, Maya replied calmly. This was an officially sanctioned investigation, approved by the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court. She placed the authorization documents on his bench. For months, Maya continued, you've shown consistent bias against defendants of color in your courtroom. You've dismissed valid legal arguments, applied different standards, and made inappropriate comments. Maya opened a folder. We have recordings of 17 instances where you mocked or belittled defendants based on their race or appearance. Would you like to hear them played back? The judge's face had shifted from shock to anger. I've been on this bench for 27 years. My record speaks for itself. Indeed it does, Maya replied, placing statistical evidence on his bench. Defendants of color receive harsher rulings in your courtroom 42% more often than white defendants in comparable cases. The reporters were frantically taking notes. Several attorneys present in the courtroom had stopped their own work to watch the scene unfold. Furthermore, Maya said, we have testimony from court staff about comments you've made in chambers that show clear racial bias. Thomas Rodriguez, the court clerk, stood up from his seat. I provided sworn statements about conversations I've witnessed, Your Honor. Judge Simmons looked around the courtroom, suddenly realizing he was surrounded by people who had been part of the investigation. His authority, which had seemed absolute minutes earlier, was crumbling before everyone's eyes. The Judicial Conduct Committee will be convening this afternoon to review our findings, Director Wilson announced. In the meantime, we request that you recuse yourself from these cases and all others pending review. The bailiff, who had received instructions beforehand, approached the bench with formal recusal papers. Judge Simmons stared at the twin attorneys, finally seeing them for who they truly were, not helpless defendants he could dismiss, but brilliant legal minds who had exposed the truth he had tried to hide for years. The gavel fell from his hand, making a final, definitive sound in the silent courtroom. 6 months had passed since that dramatic day in courtroom 4B. The Johnson twins sat side by side at a long conference table, surrounded by Bar Association officials, community leaders, and journalists. The room buzzed with anticipation as Director Wilson called the meeting to order. As you all know, he began, we're here to discuss the outcomes of the judicial misconduct investigation conducted by attorneys Maya and Maya Johnson. On the wall behind him, a projector displayed key statistics and findings from their investigation. The evidence they had gathered had proven irrefutable. Judge Walter Simmons had been suspended immediately following their revelation, and a thorough review of his past cases had been initiated. The Judicial Review Board's decision was unanimous. Director Wilson continued. After examining evidence from the undercover operation and reviewing 10 years of case records, Judge Simmons has been permanently removed from the bench. A small cheer went up from community activists in the room who had been fighting for years to address unfairness in the courts. Maya stood up, adjusting her glasses as she addressed the room. While we take no pleasure in ending someone's career, justice demanded accountability. Judge Simmons had denied fair hearings to hundreds of people based on the color of their skin. Our investigation revealed that this wasn't just about one judge, Maya added, joining her sister at the podium. It exposed weaknesses in how we monitor our judicial system. The twins had become local heroes in the months following their undercover work. News channels had interviewed them, law schools had invited them to speak, and their law practice had grown substantially. But more importantly, they had sparked real change. Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly woman who had lost her home due to one of Judge Simmons' biased rulings, stood up from the audience. Thanks to these brave young women, my case was reviewed and overturned. After 3 years of fighting, I finally got justice. Director Wilson unveiled a large poster showing the Judicial Accountability Initiative, a new program developed based on recommendations from the Johnson twins. Moving forward, he explained, all judges in our district will have quarterly reviews of their rulings to check for patterns of bias. Court observers will randomly monitor proceedings, and a new confidential reporting system will make it easier for people to report misconduct. The Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court, who had approved the undercover operation, approached the podium. The Johnson sisters showed extraordinary courage. They risked their reputations to expose injustice, and in doing so, they've made our entire legal system stronger. He presented them with certificates of recognition as the room applauded. After the formal presentation, people gathered around the twins to share stories and express gratitude. Many were former defendants from Judge Simmons' courtroom, whose cases were now being reviewed. We never set out to be heroes, Maya told a reporter who asked how it felt to create such significant change. We just believed everyone deserves equal treatment under the law, no matter what they look like or how they speak. As the event wound down, the twins stood by the window overlooking the courthouse where their investigation had unfolded. Remember when we were in law school? Maya asked her sister. We used to talk about changing the system from within. Maya nodded, smiling. I think we did a little more than that. Outside, workers were installing a new sign above the courthouse entrance. It read, Equal justice under law. Every voice matters. The twins' investigation had done more than remove one biased judge. It had started a movement. 3 other districts had already adopted similar accountability measures, and a state law was being considered to expand the reforms statewide. As they gathered their belongings to leave, a young black law student approached them shyly. You're the reason I decided to finish law school, she told them. I almost quit last year when I saw how the system worked, but you showed me that things can change if brave people stand up. The Johnson sisters exchanged a glance. This was their real victory, not just fixing past wrongs, but inspiring future generations to continue the fight for true justice. 6 months had passed since that dramatic day in courtroom 4B. The Johnson twins sat side by side at a long conference table, surrounded by Bar Association officials, community leaders, and journalists. The room buzzed with anticipation as Director Wilson called the meeting to order. "As you all know," he began, "we're here to discuss the outcomes of the judicial misconduct investigation conducted by attorneys Maya and Maya Johnson." On the wall behind him, a projector displayed key statistics and findings from their investigation. The evidence they had gathered had proven irrefutable. Judge Walter Simmons had been suspended immediately following their revelation, and a thorough review of his past cases had been initiated. The Judicial Review Board's decision was unanimous. Director Wilson continued. "After examining evidence from the undercover operation and reviewing 10 years of case records, Judge Simmons has been permanently removed from the bench." A small cheer went up from community activists in the room who had been fighting for years to address unfairness in the courts. Maya stood up, adjusting her glasses as she addressed the room. "While we take no pleasure in ending someone's career, justice demanded accountability. Judge Simmons had denied fair hearings to hundreds of people based on the color of their skin. Our investigation revealed that this wasn't just about one judge," Maya added, joining her sister at the podium. "It exposed weaknesses in how we monitor our judicial system." The twins had become local heroes in the months following their undercover work. News channels had interviewed them, law schools had invited them to speak, and their law practice had grown substantially. But more importantly, they had sparked real change. Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly woman who had lost her home due to one of Judge Simmons' biased rulings, stood up from the audience. "Thanks to these brave young women, my case was reviewed and overturned. After 3 years of fighting, I finally got justice." Director Wilson unveiled a large poster showing the Judicial Accountability Initiative, a new program developed based on recommendations from the Johnson twins. Moving forward, he explained, all judges in our district will have quarterly reviews of their rulings to check for patterns of bias. Court observers will randomly monitor proceedings, and a new confidential reporting system will make it easier for people to report misconduct. The Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court, who had approved the undercover operation, approached the podium. The Johnson sisters showed extraordinary courage. They risked their reputations to expose injustice, and in doing so, they've made our entire legal system stronger. He presented them with certificates of recognition as the room applauded. After the formal presentation, people gathered around the twins to share stories and express gratitude. Many were former defendants from Judge Simmons' courtroom, whose cases were now being reviewed. "We never set out to be heroes," Maya told a reporter who asked how it felt to create such significant change. "We just believed everyone deserves equal treatment under the law, no matter what they look like or how they speak." As the event wound down, the twins stood by the window overlooking the courthouse where their investigation had unfolded. "Remember when we were in law school?" Maya asked her sister. "We used to talk about changing the system from within." Maya nodded, smiling. "I think we did a little more than that." Outside, workers were installing a new sign above the courthouse entrance. It read, "Equal justice under law. Every voice matters." The twins' investigation had done more than remove one biased judge. It had started a movement. 3 other districts had already adopted similar accountability measures, and a state law was being considered to expand the reforms statewide. As they gathered their belongings to leave, a young black law student approached them shyly. "You're the reason I decided to finish law school," she told them. "I almost quit last year when I saw how the system worked, but you showed me that things can change if brave people stand up." The Johnson sisters exchanged a glance. This was their real victory. Not just fixing past wrongs, but inspiring future generations to continue the fight for true justice.